Has that worked? There we go. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Silver Sands webinar. My name is Colin Gray, and I'm joined this morning by Mark Ison, who's one of our senior consultants, who will take you through the session today on what's new in desktop and device management. But just before Mark takes you into the detail, for any of you who haven't been to one of these sessions before, I'll kick off with a quick introduction to Silver Sands in a slide. So, okay, you'll see the slide on your screen. Good. Okay, so Silver Sands has been in business for about 35 years now. We're a professional services organization specializing in Microsoft technologies around hybrid and cloud IT. So as the slide on your screen shows, we focus on three main areas. At the top, in the large circle, we've got Microsoft 365, and that contains several key components. First of these is Office 365, which hosts applications, as you know, like Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive. And here our consultants will work closely with clients to help them understand how to deliver, manage, and make the best use of the various applications in the suite. Then we've got Office Windows 10, where we encourage clients to take full advantage of the latest enterprise desktop features, all in the view of trying to improve the end user experience and improve remote access capabilities. And the third component in this bubble is enterprise mobility and security, which we'll talk a little bit later, but solutions like Intune and Azure AD, which have pretty much become essential tools to control deployment, management, and security for all your devices, and that's laptops, mobile phones, desktops, everything. Then moving down to the large circle, bottom left, we have Power Platform, where we can find solutions like Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, which have transformed how organizations enable digital services over the last year now that home working has become the norm. And then large circle bottom right is in Microsoft Azure. Here our consultants and development teams work with clients to migrate, integrate on their on-premise solutions with the Azure platform. And it's really a growing area, this, and if you haven't already had a look at that in any detail, I'd encourage you to do so, because based on many of the projects we're doing with other clients at present, there are a lot of Azure services that can really enhance existing business functions, your reporting capability, and generally make the overall user experience for users and clients much, much better. Around the edges, we have smaller circles with identity management, governance, and security, all standard now as part of any joined up delivery. And then last but not least, in the middle of the screen is people and devices, because the end user really should be the focus for any modern business change program. To try to help in that area, the latest part of our practice is we've a dedicated adoption and change management team for nearly 2 years now. And that sort of helps IT teams align the board or the organization's strategic vision with any changes that might be happening in Microsoft 365, just to make sure the workforce has got all the right digital skills, etc., to meet whatever business outcomes that the project's trying to achieve. And finally, while it's not on the graphic, underpinning all our professional services, we have managed support offerings, and they'll provide, the team there will provide any technical assistance or an additional pair of hands as and when needed. So that's Silver Sands on a slide. So I'll now pass over to Mark to begin the webinar.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Ison. I'm practice lead consultant in desktop and devices for Silver Sands. Here to talk to you today about desktop and device management, what's new. Primary focus is around Windows 10, because that's where the majority of the improvements have been made over the last 6 to 12 months. And we'll touch on the mobile devices a little bit as well. Only a handful of slides, and mostly be spending time in the console, in the portal, giving it a good poke around so you can actually have a look at how it works. As you can see here, if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat during the session, or if towards the end we'll have a question and answer session, so you'll be able to raise hands and ask questions. We can turn mics on, things like that later on if need be. So as far as modern management goes, desktop and devices in Tune, I want to start just by talking about a journey, and this is a very common conversation that we're having with all of our customers at the moment. Obviously, this time last year, COVID happened, everyone went home, and very quickly people put in short-term solutions to make sure that they could continue updating and pushing out apps, managing their devices while they're out of the office, whereas before they were in the office. And now we are finding that, originally, obviously, people were hoping it would only be for 3 to 6 months. That's not the case. It's going to be longer. And, even when things do go back to normal, it's going to be very different to what it was before. So now organizations are approaching us saying, right, we've dipped our toe in this modern world and we quite like it. How can we now make it better and make it more permanent rather than falling back to what we used to do, when the offices do open again? And the main key to this is co-management. Co-management provides you the bridge between your on-premises and device management solution and the cloud-based solution. Configuration Manager is the linchpin to all of that. And something which you may not necessarily be aware of is if you haven't got Config Manager at the moment, and you've got an Intune license, you are licensed for Config Manager in your on-prem environment. So in a lot of situations, we've gone and retroactively put in Configuration Manager for the sole purpose of being able to set up co-management. This just allows you, rather than doing a big bang, we're going to take you off-prem and put you on-prem, allows you to slowly drip feed your workloads over, like Windows updates, 365, installations, client apps, device configuration, and so forth. So if this is something that if it's something that you haven't begun looking at, if you have Config Manager but haven't started co-management with Intune, or again you've got Intune but haven't done the vice versa, it is definitely something worth considering speaking to us about. So with that, we'll move on to onto all the new bits, and just again reiterating that the majority of this information that and these features that we've now got are only here because of that co-management feature with Config Manager, and being able to synchronize all of the information that it has on your devices up into Intune and combine the two together. So something which we've been waiting for a really long time is some actual proper reports. They've been pretty woeful in Intune in the past. We've now got proper reports, Power BI integration, data warehouse reporting feeds, Endpoint Analytics up to the nines, all sorts of information that we're able to get out from the Endpoint Analytics now. So if I jump over to the portal, some of you who may have used analytics in the past, may be familiar with the old desktop analytics portal. Don't get me wrong, useful enough, it's still valid. They have recently removed a compliance section because they've moved that over into the reports, but it's still valid. We've got our assets of all the list of all the devices that we've got, all the applications which have been identified, all useful information that's been there a long time. They've now massively improved it over in reports. When we go over here, we can go to Endpoint Analytics, and it's actually more focused on the device itself. The information that we can get out of here now around startup performance, how much time group policy's taking as opposed to just general core boot time, being able to identify which devices are actually causing you all sorts of problems. We can look at model performance. We don't have any information. So we go. It's got some device performance. So we can go through here and we can see all the various models that we've got, what the core boot time is, sign-in time, and the amount of restarts within the last 30 days. So that one's had a lot of restarts. So that might be a device worth looking at and understanding why it's causing problems. Okay. And when we go in, startup performance, nice and high. And we've got application reliability as well. So it's identified that Outlook's hung at one point. All this information that we've never had before, just by turning on Config Manager and Intune for the Endpoint Analytics. It's also going to make proactive remediation suggestions. So that it instantly puts restarting a stopped Office Click to Run service. So Office stops running, it will go and create a schedule. Effectively, if you deploy this, it will create a scheduled task that will go and turn it on if it ever turns off. Same as with group policy. If a device hasn't updated for a period of time for whatever reason, this will go and kick in and go and tell it to do it.
Here's what I found.
Sorry about that. Other reports, the general usual ones that we're used to, device compliance reports. Always when you go into it, it will always show blank. It's because it wants you to press refresh so that it can go and get a live feed, as opposed to, again, historically, where we had information that could have been anywhere up to 24 hours out of date. Windows updates, as I say, that's moved over from the old desktop analytics over into the new report section. So do bear in mind they are in preview, so sometimes you will hit refresh and it won't come up with anything. So just wait for that to refresh. Once it's done, it will give you your basic list there, and then once it's completed, you can go over to reports and run a standalone report. So we've got any information there, unfortunately. The other one of real note that you're all going to find, hopefully of use and interest, is around the group policy reports. So group policy analytics. So without no additional configuration effort from my side, what Intune and Config Manager has started doing is evaluating the group policies that are assigned to the devices and users. And the reports that we can get out of here are being able to see all the settings that we've got within that are being applied to our devices, and if they are ready for MDM migration, yes or no. Okay. So again, being able to identify at in a very simple way settings that are deprecated that would need to come out if you were to migrate, any that aren't supported, and all the ones that are able to come over. In a bit, we're going to show. I'll show you something else a little bit more in detail on that side of things. The other bits that I mentioned, the data warehouse, we're able to have a feed here which can be put into any kind of third-party reporting services, and the Power BI integration as well. So group policy analytics, obviously I've already mentioned that briefly and kind of gone through some of that. It does get a little bit better as well, because not only have we got this overall identification of policies and settings, if we go over to devices, we've got a different group policy analytics preview. Now the main difference in here is that what I can do is I can import policies that I've already got. So if I've already got existing group policies, I back them up and then I import them into here. Once I've imported them, I've instantly got an MDM support, and I can click on that, and again I can start looking through here and see these are supported in MDM, these are not, and these don't even have ADMX support, so there might be some registry setting that's applying those, something like that, or it might just be that it's deprecated setting. So again, once you've kind of got that, you can get a good idea of the settings that aren't there, and then you could go and use another tool. One that I tend to use personally is the Security Compliance Manager, which allows you to import your group policies into there and very easily highlight multiple settings at a time and delete them out. Again, delete the settings that you don't want out, re-import it. If they're all coming up as MDM, yes, that then becomes your basis for settings that are able to go into MDM. Now, with all of these, again, part of the journey is that when you set up the co-management to begin with, you're probably not going to do a whole lot group policy wise. You're just going to be doing your evaluation. You'll look to create a setting that says that group policy, that MDM will win over group policy. And from that point, you can just create individual settings, put them out and make sure that you're happy with them. By no means do we expect anyone to be in a position who currently has or has historically had an on-premises environment to be in any position to kind of just drop all of their group policy and go, yeah, MDM all the way now, please. Majority of the implementations that we do are a combination of MDM and GPO for legacy reasons. MDM is the default and the defining authority, but GPO can sometimes be used as tactile solution to apply a specific setting that MDM either can't cater for or doesn't quite cater for as well as group policy at this point in time. Endpoint security. So the biggest change from Endpoint Security side is that they've moved it all into a single location. So it makes it far more straightforward, far easier to identify where the different settings and policies are. Previously, you went into the device configuration and created an endpoint protection policy, which included all the AV, disk encryption, firewall, and all those bits, and it got a little bit messy. Now it's all quite nicely broken out. They've worked on the security baseline side of things. They're continually updating those, and that should be used to evaluate. So once you've done your group policy, if you did the group policy to MDM solution, you would deploy that MDM. You would then use the security baseline to compare what Microsoft recommend against what you've got in place. And then again, you've got a decision to make. Do you follow Microsoft or do you stick with what you're doing? It's whatever works best for you. Obviously, there's always certain scenarios where you need to veer from what Microsoft recommend. The only kind of real bit to consider around the endpoint security is the licensing element, because it does get a little bit tricky. The differences between E3 and E5, there's a fair bit there, mostly around ATP, but it's when you've got ATP turned on, it turns on some of the extra little things that aren't normally there under the E3 option. So within the endpoint security section of the portal, so if we jump into the security baselines first, so we've got Edge baseline, Defender, Endpoint, and General Security. So we can go in there, and Microsoft provide their basic one there. So that's from December 2020. So for this one, I can go into here and just review this security baseline against what it is that we're doing at the moment. So we can see that there are six conflicts. So we can go into the settings and see, right, so these devices have got some conflicts. Have a look at a per setting status, and then again start to evaluate where those conflicts are. So there's one there. So for some reason, this setting, Microsoft recommends one, we've got another. Let's look at the two and decide which works best for us. Other than that, policy-wise, say antivirus, disk encryption, firewall, endpoint, attack surface, and account protection, all just now broken out into their individual areas, just to make it slightly more straightforward for you to be able to create the policies. Let me just go and create those. So now we can see in here, this is very specific. It's hello for business only. So what you might do is go back just to make it a little bit more identifiable. In Windows 10, account protection, Windows Hello policy. Okay, then it's very clear to you what that's doing. From a setting standpoint, the biggest change is they are moving away from the templated kind of setting policies. So almost the opposite to what they've done with the endpoint security to simplify that side of things. They've done the opposite with the settings catalog. Rather, so to make it fall in line a bit more with group policy and what you're used to from that side of things. So when we go to devices, Windows, configuration profiles, and create a profile, we've got either templates, which then gives us a list of all the ones that we're used to. And there are still some settings that require templates, like certificates, VPN profiles. They still require a profile, but the rest of it, you can use the settings catalog. When we create that, demo right. Okay, we can then add as many of the settings as we want. So there is chance to get confused, because there are some bits that cross over again with BitLocker, and obviously you've got that endpoint protection one, so you want to make sure you're not getting confused on that. But it's very nice to find it. One of the ones that I'll give as an example is the one that I mentioned earlier, which is the allowing MDM to win over GPO. Historically, that was one of the OMA URI settings, so a custom setting that was going in there. Finally, they have added that as a setting into here. So now I can tick that box and say, yes, I want that in there. If I do delivery optimization. And let's say all I want to do is set the download mode. Tick that box. That's the only setting I need. Because after that, use defaults. Happy with the defaults. Not worried about how much disk space you're using, because Microsoft will intelligently manage that. So this then allows you to create either a master default policy, which you can then have your exceptions for, similar to group policy, or you can still take it in the same approach that you used to, where which they used to, where you have kind of those templates, and you can create your own to the particular setting types or particular purposes, whatever suits your needs best. But it does make it incredibly more flexible. Which is the better option, the default or lots of individual settings? Personally, having a default with exceptions is more manageable than having 100 different policies for individual settings, but again, each to their own, personal preferences. Actually, just one other bit just to pull up on that. The other bit that they've now introduced in regards to the policies is policy sets. So again, previously, when you created all these policies, you then had to go into each one individually and create an assignment for it. We don't need to do that anymore. We can now create a default user policy set. So from here, I'll create that demo. And then, as you can see, it's going to go through each of the stages, application management. So which applications are we going to manage from there if we need to do anything? Or we can just use an existing policy for configuration, So we can do Outlook. So we've got an Outlook and an Edge configuration policy here, so we can include those. Device management, we then got our various policies. So we'll want the VPN profile. For the VPN, we'll need the certificates. We want our device, we want our Defender policy, and include all of those. So again, just add all of those in for us. Device compliance policy, our live Windows 10 one. Then enrollment, what's the enrollment type, and so forth. We build out an entire set of policy set for a user. So then when on your assignment, you assign it to the group and everything will go to that user, rather than having to hunt around 10, 20, 30, 40 different policies and have I included that one? Have I included that one? I can't remember. I'll have to go and check. And then obviously once you've got that there, you can just add additional policies in as and when, or remove them when needed. So we're going to move on to device actions. So again, another improvement that they've included from a Windows standpoint. Again, a big plus for that, or a big reason for that, is the config manager combination. So now the config manager information is synchronizing up to Intune, and Intune is synchronizing it back down onto config manager. So what that means is when we go to our devices, okay, not only have we got the standard Intune actions, we've also now got a host of config manager actions. I mean, one of them that I quite like is collections. I mean, that was something that they took years and years and years to put into config manager, being able to see what members, what collections your machine's a member of. This will now be able to give you that information. If it's able to put it back, it might just take a moment. There we go. So now I can see all the collections that my machine is a member in. Resource Explorer, so same thing, kind of ideas, bits that you've got in config manager, now available within here. Also, from a action standpoint, we've also able to initiate config manager policy synchronizations, as well as the Intune ones. So we can initiate those from here rather than having to go into the config manager console. We can enable BitLocker key rotation. So, by default, you might the policy might have it that it automatically rotates every 90 days or something anyway. If you didn't have that, but you wanted to anyway because it got flagged as a high risk for some reason, click that button and it will go and generate a new one for you. The other button that really happy and has only turned up in the last few days really is this one here, which is Collect Diagnostics. So Microsoft provided a tool quite a while ago called MMAT, Microsoft Mdm Analysis tool, that allows you to run it locally on your machine, and it create a report similar to the one that we looked at earlier with the group policy, where it says, well, these are the settings that you're applied, these are the ones that are MDM ready, these are the ones that aren't. If I press this button, it will go and remotely initiate that collection of logs. Okay, it takes a little while to happen. Once it has happened, it then appears in here. And if I have a look, hopefully, I think I downloaded it somewhere. Zip file here, and then a whole host of bits in here. So now we've got all of our, there's all the bits that it's looked through, and we've got all of our event viewer logs, everything else. So full set of diagnostics to actually start investigating. Again, one of the one of the pains, I suppose, with Intune, and I guess Azure in general, is that we can't see the back end. We can't see a whole lot of what's going on in between the console and the end device. This is now going to help us do that and be able to get it without having to rely on doing a remote session with someone or asking them to send us logs or anything like that. Okay, lastly, just a few little bits on the mobile devices. As I say, there's not much has really changed over the last 6 to 12 months from iOS and Android standpoint. They've been focusing on Windows because people working from home, and prior to that, they put all their eggs into the mobile phone basket anyway. So they've already kind of, I guess, yes, put all their money down on that one. But as far as general visual improvements go, policy settings are now broken down to enrollment type. iOS, for example, is it a setting that is only available for supervised mode? Does it have to have gone through a fully managed enrollment, or is it just a personal enrollment? It's now very clearly identifiable which is for which. They've released now into production and made generally available Defender for iOS and Android, not necessarily configured within Intune, but obviously deployed from it, all configured within the Defender Security portal, but now a client app that is able to do it. And I believe that they are also going, and the other bit which is still in preview, which is Microsoft Tunnel, which is their VPN solution or per app VPN solution, which finally terminates back at Microsoft rather than having to have your own third party. I believe that Tunnel functionality is actually going to be merged into the Defender application. So even if you weren't going to use Defender, if the Tunnel solution was something you were to use in future, then that's going to be merged into that application. So from a portal standpoint, just so you've got that visual representation, when we go and create the profile, device restrictions, create. Okay, if I expand any of these, very clearly, it now tells you whether it's for all enrollment types, automated, or device enrollment and automated, or just automated. So it's all very, very clear now. So hopefully you're not in a situation where you've applied a setting and you're looking at it going, well, why isn't it working? It's very clear which ones they support. So that is basically me done from those kind of key points of the what's new. Just want to leave with this quote. It's a slightly old one, but still very relevant. And the fact that it's old proves that the investment that Microsoft are making into co-management. That it's not going away. Don't worry or think that you've got to run away from your on-prem or run away from group policy. Yes, I've been saying for many years that it is a legacy technology and it is a dying art. However, we appreciate that you can't drop it until such a time, which might not be for another 10 years. Who knows? It's around. Until that time, Microsoft ourselves are committed to supporting a hybrid co-management environment between SCCM and Intune for your device management. Obviously with the intention of you getting to a point where you don't need that config manager, you don't need group policy, you don't need map network drives and whatever else it may be that you've got currently stored on-prem. Okay, so with that, I guess we'll bring Colin back in and see if there have been any questions at all.
Thank you, Mark. That's been really interesting. It's from my point of view, it's quite interesting how much Intune, etc., has moved on in the last year. So that's really good. Has anybody got any questions? As there hasn't been anything come up in the chat over the last 25 minutes or so. If you've got, would you like to unmic yourself and just ask the question directly? Anyone got any questions? Nothing particularly, no? I have a question, Mark, if nobody else has got one, as I always do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, as I say, I think Intune has matured dramatically over the last year or so compared to what it would be. If you've got organizations out there, many of whom are licensed for Intune, but bought it as part of EMS, have never historically managed their devices, how would you recommend they sort of start moving to a place where maybe they start looking at, maybe building devices or deploying Office and Windows, etc.? How do they start the journey on device deployment as opposed to maybe just using it in Intune for conditional access or something around, the security of an MDM solution?
So ultimately, the first question that we always have to pose is, what is your, what are your legacy requirements? If a customer says, well, we're SharePoint Online, we've migrated all of our file shares, we don't have any printers or any kind of login scripts or anything like that, then they're potentially a customer who could look to go straight to an Azure AD device rather than a hybrid Azure AD device, and take a bit of a bigger jump and go straight into that. If, however, you are currently running an on-premise domain and you have print servers, you have file servers, whatever else it is, internal resources that you need access to, then your only real option to move to Intune for modern deployment is to go down to for the hybrid Azure AD join. So that is available through Autopilot, both internally and externally. The only caveat, if you're doing it externally, is that you need an always-on VPN solution. If, however, you're not quite ready for any of those kind of things, then Configuration Manager. It's not quite. It is still the beast, don't get me wrong, but if you're implementing Config Manager purely for the purposes of co-management and being able to, say, bring them into device management, even if it was just for the Endpoint Analytics, you never planned on using it for deploying software or anything else, just to have the devices in there synchronizing up to Intune and co-management, that is where you would start. That is the best place to start. It's not, we've done implementations of that over just a few days. It doesn't take particularly long to get a basic single site server config manager in with co-management set up. And from that point, once that's there, it's, the world's your oyster as far as being able to expand what it is you're then what it is you're using Intune for. If you're not quite ready for the autopilot side of things because you don't have the don't have VPNs or anything like that, then in the meantime, you could, by putting Config Manager in there, you could look to use that to do a basic build if that's something that you don't have a solution for at the moment.
And I presume there's no reason why anyone couldn't just start using like the group policy analyzer to start looking at, how many of their on-premise group policies theoretically could be supported in the cloud, because that's almost like a first step to move into that Azure AD piece.
Yeah. So if you're not using Intune for anything, but you are licensed, you will still be able to go into that portal and upload your GPO backups and get that information out. That will still be there. The bits that you will be missing are the real world, I guess, modeling that that Intune is doing in the background when all of the devices are in synchronized and talking with Config Manager and Intune.
Good. Excellent. So has anyone else thought of any other questions related to that or anything else that we've covered this morning? I've just reposted the feedback survey into the chat. So if you could spare 20 seconds just to quickly go in and fill that. If there's anything we can do to improve these sessions or any other suggestions, please enter. It's all really, really valuable feedback. And if you think of anything longer term, please just drop Mark or I a quick chat or an email, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. But otherwise, hopefully you found this interesting. Maybe it's tempted you to go and start looking at a little bit more areas around desktop deployment and using Intune to manage your devices more completely. Well, I think maybe we've got a question coming in from Matt here. Matt, feel free to on-mic and just ask the question directly if it's easier. Can you hear us, Matt? Matt's still typing just at the moment, so.
Okay.
Give him a second just to. Have you still got a question, Matt? You'd like to just on mic and just ask it if it's easier.
And if not, we can pick it up afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. So we can always answer it rather than keep everyone else hanging on. We'll hang on for a little moment here for anybody who wants to just ask any questions on a one-to-one basis. But I think we'll stop the recording now. Thank you everyone for attending, and please take a moment to fill in the feedback survey. And we'll hopefully see you all again sometime after Easter once we get the new set of webinars arranged. Okay, so thank you for attending and have a happy Easter.
Thank you.